I'm Sarah Pearson, co founder of The Uncomfortable Conversation, and I am here today with Mike. And we are going to be jumping into some more uncomfortable conversations about bystander intervention and listening. So, Mike, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, I would love to start with a little bit about just how you became somebody who has uncomfortable conversations.
I guess I feel like people find out when to have uncomfortable conversations at different times, and sometimes you just kind of get thrown into one and realize you're having one.
So,
Um,
when was that for you?
I know for me, a big time was I was 19 and my mom had just killed herself.
Hmm.
And I had a lot of really close friends that unfortunately just not friends with anymore that I kind of lost through the situation. And, I went to them saying, I just need someone to talk to.
And what happened?
And they didn't want to talk. It was, you
Hmm.
could tell they were uncomfortable. They didn't know what to do. Oh, I'm busy tonight. I'm busy that night. I really don't want, some people even just saying, I really just don't want to talk about that. And it made me realize like this is all I need right now. I
Yeah.
just need a friend to listen to me.
Yeah.
I never wanted to make another one of my friends feel that way when they needed something. That
Mhm.
I'd rather sit there and have that uncomfortable conversation with you, because that uncomfortable conversation to me is far more comfortable than what you're probably having to deal with. And
Yeah.
if it means being there to support you as a friend, then if I care about you, then I should do that.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I'm sorry that that's something that you had to go through at an early age. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more from sort of like what kind of how you carried that forward, because I think for you it's one thing to go through that and to say to yourself, well, I really don't want anybody else to go through that. But you actually then took it really to the next level because you've been trained on some of this uncomfortable conversation, particularly in the context of bystander intervention.
Yeah. Some of the things, it took a while for myself to realize, why was it that friends didn't want to listen or talk? It took a long time for myself to realize, what I was going through and accept and understand my own feelings from it. There's therapy involved. There were conversations with people that were okay having those conversations that are still great friends of mine
Mhm.
now, and realizing that those, part of having that uncomfortable conversation is just accepting the person that's talking to you and realizing that you're not the important one right now. What they have to say is what's important in
Yeah.
that moment. I was able to go through a Hear for the Music training, which was, big on bystander intervention, specifically around mainly in music venues, bars, music venues, things
Yeah.
like that.
So just in case some people who are listening
Yeah.
don't know what bystander intervention is, can we let's take a
Yeah.
couple minutes to, so do you want to start? You should we can toggle back
Sure.
and forth on what bystander intervention is and isn't.
Yeah, so a lot of it is focused on, if you are a witness to something that's going on, whether it's harassment, sexual harassment, some form of violence, of how can you intervene and kind of de-escalate the situation? How can you make that other person that is a victim feel more comfortable? How can you help remove them from that situation and just eliminate the situation altogether if possible?
So I think one big misunderstanding that I hear about bystander intervention is that the intervention is not against the bad guy. It's actually in service of safety, restoring safety to a community. And so I think that's often been sort of one reframe for people that's usually
Yeah.
helpful, is that it's not necessarily sort of like running into the rescue, but it's about really centering the people that might not feel safe in a particular environment and then how you show up for them.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people might think of it as, I need to run in and fight this person because that's what's going to stop things. But now you're just creating a whole other problem. Sometimes that intervention is just walking over, making eye contact with someone and letting them know, hey, I'm here. If you need something, there's somebody close
Yeah.
by. It can be, telling the bartender, hey, can you go check on this person? They're right down there. Can you stand close and listen? Can you, just walking over to that conversation and, you know, popping in and just saying hi or walking over, standing next to them, making your presence known will
Yeah.
tend to make whoever is making that person uncomfortable, a little bit more uncomfortable themselves.
Right. Well, it's a little bit like minding other people's business, which I
Yeah.
think sometimes we're raised to just like mind your own business,
Yep.
like stay out of it. But one of the impacts of still always staying out of it is that the people who can't stay out of it don't have anybody who has their back.
Yeah.
So it's like how do you reorient yourself in a group situation to be aware of other people's experiences?
It can be very difficult, especially if it's something that you don't know, to want to say, like you said, I'm going to mind their own
Their
business.
business, right?
'Cause you have no idea the full situation necessarily.
Yeah.
You can kind of just sometimes go off of, especially at something like a music venue, you probably don't even know what
Yeah.
the conversation is. You can just tell from body language what's happening, and you're trying to make this decision based on, what you can kind of read body language wise or emotion wise. Um, and I think that's when it's best to just say, hey, I'm just gonna, maybe pop over and listen for a second
Right.
and see, is this something that I need to intervene in, try to do something, and just make your
Yeah.
presence known.
So this is something that it's not just that you've conceptually learned about it, it's actually something that you've practiced and experienced yourself in the moment. So would you mind sharing a story or example? I know you had shared one about your wife that
Yeah.
was really helpful, and she gave you permission for us to have a little bit more of a conversation about it today.
Yeah, it was actually this past March on St. Patrick's Day. All of a sudden she looks over at me and she says, hey, this guy next to me is really bothering me. And so I said, all right, I said, let's switch sides. Let me put some space in between you, um, and figure out what's going on. And she said, he keeps reaching over, he's touching my shoulder, leaning into my face, trying to say things to me. I was like, all right, let's get this to stop. Like, got the space in between us, and then almost immediately he decided, all right, I'll just go to the other side now.
Mm,
Um, Luckily, in this short amount of time, one of the security guards actually noticed what was going on and came over, from multiple directions, even. So it wasn't even just one that
so there's
noticed.
multiple security
Multiple
guards. Yep.
security guards. And I'd say within maybe 2 to 3 minutes of this whole situation first starting, the man was removed from the venue. There was no big showy thing. It didn't have to kind of stop the music or
Nobody
anything.
punched anyone.
No one punched anyone, and it, I think my wife appreciated that it didn't have to become like some spectacle. That it was just, all right, we're gonna remove the situation, keep the situation, as normalized as possible to keep you comfortable. And there was a lot going through my head too of, when I'm switching sides with this guy and having, I'm acknowledging him. I'm also thinking, all right, I have my wife is in a safe spot right now.
Hmm.
How is he going to interact? He appears to be intoxicated. Is this something where he could escalate to violence because he sees me as a
Yeah.
threat now? So
How did you know that the security guards clocked what was happening?
pretty much immediately there was one, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 feet in front of us that was kind of looking around all night and almost immediately noticed.
Mm,
And you could see them start looking
yeah.
around. I don't know if they had a radio or what, that they were able to say something to somebody else, but it was almost as if that they were just looking for these kinds of
Yeah.
situations, that they were ready to react to it.
So the way that you're describing it is that it went pretty quickly from being sort of one problematic person with your wife to two people that did not want this behavior
Yeah.
with this person to then like five or six people that were saying, yo, cut it out. And that happened pretty quickly and seamlessly. I'm curious whether or not the security guards had their eye on this person being potentially
Yeah.
inappropriate or borderline inappropriate with other folks before
Yeah, I know it
approaching your wife.
wasn't, it by far wasn't the beginning of the show. So we had already been there for at least an hour or so,
Hmm.
and we didn't notice him around earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah, he very well could have
Yeah.
been bouncing around the venue until he
Right.
found someone that was okay with his actions
Right.
or wouldn't say something about it.
But one thing that you brought up that I think I've at least heard and experienced myself is one reason that people don't speak up, whether it's the person that's being victimized or somebody who might want to intervene, is that fear of making a scene, right?
Yeah.
And so it's well, I don't want to cause a big scene, even though like you're not the one that actually
Yep.
caused the scene. It's the person who's doing the things they're not supposed to be doing that's causing the scene. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to have a scene.
Yep.
There would be no scene if you were not in the scene. And so the so kind of how did that after that experience happen, sort of like what did so you it sounds like you were able to then just go back and feel safe in the concert. I'm wondering if that had been different. Do you think that experience might have been different for you or your wife if, for example, this person had just kind of wandered off?
Yeah. I know for a little while my wife was very on edge during it. She was
Hmm.
looking around trying to see, can I still see this guy? Is he still here? And I had to reassure her. I was like, I'd watched, security went over. He is not here anymore.
Hmm.
He's no longer in this
Yeah.
venue. So I know, I think for her it stayed a little bit more of an uncomfortable night. She had the far worse experience that night than I had to deal with.
Hmm.
Um, and I think if he had not been removed, I could see her not
Yeah.
wanting to have been there, and we probably would have left.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that we had talked about earlier that stuck with me, sort of both from your experience with your mom as well as the way that you describe the experience with your wife, is just it's a little bit of a willingness to take on the sense that like bad things can happen,
Yeah,
right? And it's not to accept it, but it's to open your eyes to it and to live your life as though that might be a possibility.
yeah.
So, can you say a little bit more just about in those moments, kind of like what plays out for you?
I mean, for me, and I have, when it's my wife looking over at me and saying this is what's happening, she's the person I care most about in this world. I don't want something ever happening to her. That it wasn't even like a hesitant thought crossing my mind of
Yeah.
I need to intervene right now. I'm going to do everything in my power to put an end to the situation. I think it makes it an easier way to react when it's
Yeah.
a loved one, someone that than, if it was a total stranger, would you have noticed this necessarily if it was a total stranger and you just weren't looking for it?
Right. There's a learning process that happens around being an engaged bystander. I think one of the flip sides when it's somebody who's close to you, I think is which you had reflected on the situation is could I have done more or did I do, sort of did I do enough, right? And
Yeah.
so I like to think about that situation as like you might have been the lead in engaging in that, but you had a whole team with you, right?
Yeah.
And so thinking about how those because I'm really interested in the security guards,
Yeah.
right? Because if you're thinking about the sort of next layer of bystanders, like how do we get those is like you're trained on it, you're up close, you had practiced these kinds of skills in your head, you sort of understood conceptually, like you were prepared, and it was the person that you care about most in the world. So then if you're going to take that one layer out is I'm wondering, I mean, it sounds like the security guards must have been, must have had some level of training
Yeah.
or the venue may have told them that this kind of behavior is not okay.
Yeah.
And
I definitely had those thoughts going through my mind of, even later in the night after this had all situated, we're back home and in bed of, would the situation have been different had security not noticed and it was just
mhm.
her, myself, and this guy? Would things have ended differently? Would he have become violent? Would he have seen me as a threat now because I'm intervening with him? Would other people have stepped in? Would it have just been something of my wife and I
Yeah.
kind of trying to, keep her safe and remove ourselves? And, if security wasn't there and he finally stepped away from us, would he have just gone and done this to someone else?
Right.
Um,
Right. Well, I think about times, so my experience both being somebody who in public spaces has not felt safe, but then also being somebody who's been trained on bystander intervention, some of the tools that are in my toolbox are different. So I always joke that one of my favorite bystander intervention lines is like, "Hi, I'm Sarah," Beca- because I'm looking for. I know that in most situations I will need some sort of physical strength to
yeah.
help step in. And can I find that person? And how quickly can I scan my environment for safety versus scanning it for danger? And
Yeah.
so I think that's one thing that I think that I've learned to do. There's one experience I had. I was working, I was a staff member at a big gala event, so not exactly the same as a concert, but similar.
Yeah.
And I always give the same speech before, which is, sort of like no guest is worth your dignity. Like if you see something, say something. And so I always, again, sort of normalize that,
Yeah.
like, things happen when people are drinking and in a large group together. And so if you see something, tell me before it becomes a problem, because then we can think about what we're going to do to get to do about it together. And so sure enough, somebody else, another colleague, came over to me during that event and said, hey, I just want you to come check something out with me. There was a woman who appeared to be very intoxicated with a man that she was sort of leaning over. And so again, this goes back to like, sometimes you mind other people's business and it's like not what you think
Yeah.
think it is. So I walked over, I was like, hi, I'm Sarah. I work here. Like, are you having a good time tonight? And it turns out they were a married couple. And she was, she was pretty intoxicated, but they sort of seen, hey, he's like, she's had a little bit too much. I'm gonna try to get her home. But it was clearly that she was leaving with somebody who was
Yeah.
safe. Now, the story does not end there. Turns out that as they left, the woman collapses. So they came back into the venue to find us because we had said we want to be helpful, right? And so it's like, I
Yeah.
think that's like the other thing when you think about what safety looks like is the more that you can proactively signal, like, again, going back to the example with your concert is like, what would be, you are clearly somebody, like if you were tagged in, you'd be like, I'm here. And so
Um,
you told me a story about a time that you did get tagged in.
yeah. So it was, I was at home for the night and it was a,
You got tagged in from home.
yeah. So I was in bed and had to get up and get dressed, but I had a friend, it was a male friend of mine texting me. And he was out with my wife, her sister, some of their friends. It was a group of maybe 5 or 6 of them at a local bar and hanging out for the night. And he's texting me about some guy that's there that was literally just going around table to table. He was grabbing women, giving them a kiss. He grabbed my friend, a male friend from behind, gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek. He was saying very vulgar things to my wife
Mm,
and other people at the table that I'm just not even going to say what it was right now. But he was doing this throughout the whole bar.
mm,
But you could also see him. So at this point, I asked, is this? I'm like, do you need me to come down there? Like,
mhm.
do you want me to? I mean, he's like, I don't know. It's really uncomfortable. Like, you're already at home. I was gonna know. I'm already out of bed. Like, the
Yeah,
car keys are in my hand. I'll see
right.
you in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I got down there and they pointed out who the guy was, so I was aware of who he was in the bar. Highly intoxicated. But one of the big things that was a huge red flag to me that I noticed is he was very clearly irregular. He was high-fiving the bouncers, talking to the bartenders, just friendly, calling him his
Mm,
name, and just having a good time with all of them. I was like, oh, this is probably completely normal for him, and this is how he
right.
acts here. And they just brush it off as, oh, that's so and so. Like, it's okay. And you could see how uncomfortable people were at the tables, and they just choosing not to say a single thing and was just accepting it.
Yeah. So what did you do?
I made eye contact with him as soon as
Mhm.
I could and made sure that he was aware that there was somebody else over here now, that I was watching him.
Yeah.
And I just
And then what happened?
he walked by our table once and I could see him look over. And I just kind of stared him down and just made sure that, with my body language, this isn't okay. I'm not going
Yeah.
to be okay if you step over here.
Yeah.
He was only there for maybe another 15 minutes or so, but as he left, yeah, I saw him give the bouncer a big hug, a high five, and walk out the door with other people there. And, immediately could see at the table that, tensions were a little bit lower now, that it was just like, all right, finally, this guy's gone. But it was, a lot of conversations with my wife afterwards and also my friend that texted me, and just,
Mhm.
with him, it was just validating, like, hey, no, like, you did the right thing. You didn't know what to
Yeah.
do in the situation. You shot me a text message. Like, that's
Well, he
all you needed
called
to
somebody
do.
who was trained on intervening
Yeah.
and that he knew would know what to do.
Yeah. And, I validated, trying to help validate his feelings. I'm like, no, like, you weren't treated okay either. Like, it's not okay for him to just come up, just because you're a guy, he can't come up
Yeah.
behind you, give you a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Like, that's not okay either.
Yeah.
Having a lot of conversations with my wife about, what he was saying to her, giving her a hug and touching her shoulders, and tried kissing her and doing
Yeah.
that to other people at the table. And it was, you know, just really helping validate how she was feeling in that moment, that she felt
Yeah.
attacked, that she felt uncomfortable.
Can we
Um,
pause on
yeah,
this idea of validation?
yeah,
Because I think that this would be a great thing
yeah.
to unpack a little bit.
Okay.
So, what does that sound like when you validate someone's feelings?
With him, I think it was part of just that kind of old school man, thought like, oh, it's okay. I can deal with this. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Just kind of reassuring him, like, this isn't something like, you don't have to be embarrassed about. I'm not here to make a joke about this to you. I'm here to just tell you, like, if you feel uncomfortable about this situation, you're okay
You're right
saying
to
that.
feel
You are,
uncomfortable
yeah,
about
it
it
is.
because it
I
was
would feel uncomfortable too.
yeah.
Um, and I
So
think,
wait, let's say that. So let's slow that down one more
yeah,
time, right? Because again, we're sort of this is something that you have built up over years of experience, but having talked to like lots and lots of different folks out in the world, not everybody feels like they would even know how to go about. Like you see, validate someone's feelings, listen with empathy.
yeah,
What is that actually like? That makes feel like a mystery to people. And so I think one of the things we always talk about with uncomfortable conversation is be practical. And
yeah,
so it's to be as specific. So what I heard you say is it's one is when you encountered the instinct to, which again is I think kind of stereotypically male
yeah,
instinct to minimize or laugh it off.
yeah,
You called out both of those things. You're like, no, it is a big deal.
yeah,
Yes, that would make you uncomfortable. You don't need to laugh it off with me.
yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I remember one of the things he said was, like, it was only this.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're right. You can say it was only this. I said, but if I didn't show up, if somebody didn't intervene, if his behavior wasn't noticed, what else could it have been?
Yeah.
It's not about, what happened then, is what were his intentions?
Right. And I've experienced this personally because sometimes it's you might have the perspective of it's only this to me, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine. Sometimes it's like if somebody non-consensually puts their hand on my shoulder, for example, that's fine. Or hugs. Sometimes you meet somebody for the first
Yeah.
time and they give you a hug and I'm like, I'm fine with it. But at the same time, if I am somebody in the room that has more power, would this be okay if it were my child? Would this be okay if it were a friend of mine who had had a more recent trauma than me?
Yeah.
Is it, and that if I can, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, where if you can live your life with at least just like a sliver of acceptance that like some people have it worse off than you,
Yeah.
then it imprompts you to behave differently on behalf of other people. And
Yeah.
so when you're thinking about like what that, so it's like, okay, well, it's like even if it was only for you, might not be only for somebody else.
Yeah, I think, one of the perspectives you can look at is, it might only be that for you, but what does that look like to the other people at the table that are uncomfortable by this?
Right.
It can be, hey, he's letting him do this to him. Is he going to be there to support me?
Right.
Is this just going to be a joke to them if they do this to me now?
Right.
That
Are you gonna leave it to the most vulnerable person in the room to have to speak up for
Yeah,
themselves rather than speak up on behalf
yeah,
of safety for
yep,
everybody? Um, So you had also told me a story about a bar that you went to that had some really positive, like that it was clear that they had been working on creating safety in their
yeah.
space.
It was a brewery up in Maine. My wife and I were there for a night away, and they had, when you go inside, they just had all single stall unisex bathrooms, and right when you shut the door, there was probably like a full 18 by 24-inch poster size, so you could not miss it. It was colorful. You weren't gonna not see it somehow, but on there, put how to recognize all the staff. It said, look for this badge on all of their
Yeah.
shirts. If you need a safe way out of the brewery, if you need to have help removing yourself from someone, if you need somebody else removed from here, if you need a way to call an Uber safely or way to get back to somewhere, use these code words. We'll know exactly what
Yeah.
you're talking about. We'll make sure you're comfortable. We can get you out of this situation safely.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of goes back to, it doesn't have to make a scene of anything. It's just this non-flashy, easy way of just saying, hey, we're here for you. And just thinking, like, even just a bar doing that or a brewery doing that, how simple that is just to put on a bathroom
Yeah.
wall where the majority of people that are there are going to see it at some
Right.
point.
Right. And if you're somebody who maybe came there
Yeah.
to do something wrong,
Yeah.
that would all it's, oh, they're gonna see me here.
Yeah.
And people are watching, and
Yeah.
people are watching my behavior. And to some extent that does, I think, impact people's decisions.
Yeah. I think it's going to make you more like, people around you are watching you. It's
Right.
not, your
Well, it's right.
chances are you're going to be seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, it's when if you think about, but effective bystander intervention is that it increases the level of safety in a particular space or community,
Yeah.
or it reduces the level of vulnerability that's possible. So it's like, sort of, how do you kind of lift up the most vulnerable? And in that case, it's like, hey, we all have people's backs around here.
Yeah. I think it's, you have to normalize it. It happens to a lot of people. Something bad happens to a lot of people that, just, if you normalize that and let them know, hey, like, we're here for you. It's okay
Yeah.
to have those feelings. It's, something, if something happens,
Right.
someone's here to support you.
Right. Well, and sometimes I think, and I've had to learn this through my own experience. I'm as a survivor of sexual abuse and somebody who I have experienced sexual harassment in spaces, and is that sometimes I might feel unsafe, but I am actually not in danger. And so that's how, like that. And even in those situations, it's better for me to speak up about it,
Yeah.
because then you can get the information that you need, right? So it's like you get the information for yourself, you get the information on behalf of others. So one example I have, around that, I was waiting for a train. It was late night, red line, waiting for a train, and there's just somebody that was kind of pacing back and forth on the platform and sort of staring at other people. And I was feeling myself just starting to get, and I get particularly anxious on train platforms. I just, for some reason, think that like everyone's going to fall into the train tracks and die. So I'm like, am I scared for this person? Am I scared of this
Yeah.
person? And so I'm just like freaking out a little bit. And so just like another passenger standing next to me, and I just turned. I was like, "Hi, excuse me." And of course, I'm wearing a watch. "Hi, do you have the time?" And he looks at us, says, "Oh, it's like 9:30." And I said, "Okay, well, the reason I was asking you the time is because I'm nervous about that person over there."
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, that person over there?" He's like, "That person is exhibiting drug-seeking behavior. And I know that because I'm a substance abuse counselor." And I was like, "Oh, well, I feel better now." And he's like, "Come on the train with me." And I was like, "Great." And it didn't exactly have that perfect tone,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
what it felt like to me at the time, where it was, oh, I felt unsafe. I found a safe person, and now I feel more safe. And so, and like that has such a ladder effect on the particular community, because the more people who are scared, the more power the people that is making them scared tends to have. So bystander intervention training, you learn a little bit about the concept of bystander intervention,
Yeah.
right? And then what else do you do at a bystander intervention?
So I remember, it was in
Scenarios, probably.
yeah, we went through kind of an overall, like, what's this training gonna look like, a little bit of a Q&A in there. We did breaking up into groups, talking about, what does it look like to each individual, what is,
Yeah.
what's something to look out for that you think you need to see,
And there's some practical skills. So the D's of bystander intervention:
we did some
distract,
yeah
delegate, defer.
yeah ended up doing like some little mock scenarios
Yeah.
to kind of see what that would look like.
And if you said something that wasn't the perfect thing, did people shame you in your
No.
group? Okay, I'm just
I
asking.
think
I didn't think they
yeah,
did, but
I think a big thing to realize is there's not necessarily a perfect thing to say. It's just something instead of nothing,
right.
is better. And I think that's why a lot of people don't act up, is they're afraid that they're not going to say the perfect thing, or what they're say might make things worse.
Yeah.
But chances are, if you at least say something, it's going to make it a little bit better.
Right. And I think once you figure out that you don't have to say something directly to somebody who is perpetrating harm or who is behaving in a threatening or disturbing manner, that actually it's like part of that power shift that you can,
Yep.
by engaging some other people. Right. And so I think in the first example that we opened with about your wife, where you did do something direct, is another option for somebody else that didn't know what to do in that moment can also be making, we were talking about, it's like eye contact, either eye contact with somebody next to you that's like, hey, can you like
Yep.
come help me out here? Like is always also like a good option.
Yeah. The more people you get on your side, the easier that situation is going to be
Yeah.
to handle. And now you're not alone as the person trying to deal
Right.
with the situation. You have other people kind of in your bullpen and on your side as well, trying to take care of it too.
Right.
Kind of makes that person that is the perpetrator, they're going to feel smaller. And now they're the one in the uncomfortable
Yeah.
situation when,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. So it's, I like to think about kind of how many, there's these different levels, right? So it's, can you, I've seen people who can be really an architect of a group bystander intervention. So it's like, you stand over there between this person,
Yeah.
you call security,
Yeah.
I'm going to take this person over here and make sure that they're okay. And it's, sort of like, you go see if this person needs a glass of water
Yeah.
and can sort of handle, like, sort of triage the bystander intervention. Then there's the people that have really good skills. So one thing that I would talk about when you're doing a work environment, one of the benefits of doing scenarios within a closed community is you get to hear people's style, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, if you need somebody who can kind of like jump in and make a joke or change a subject or sort of like get this over here, create a distraction, I want to know who those people are. If like, I want to know the people that are like not afraid to step into a physical fight would be a good
Yeah.
thing to know, right? I'd want to know the people that have good verbal skills. Like, your friend clearly knew that they should call you because you had a little bit of everything that you would be able to bring to the situation. Let me call Mike because Mike is like the person that we need here right now, and that's great. Okay, so we talked a little bit about your experience participating in a bystander training workshop, but
Yeah.
that's not the only way that you might be able to build or learn about some of these skills that really help you behave in ways that create more safety. So like, can you think of some other examples of what could be helpful?
Yeah, I think, one a job I had growing up when I was in high school and college was I was a lifeguard and swim instructor at a
Oh,
summer
yeah.
camp and a local pool. And, when you're a lifeguard, you have to spend, you're spending 8 hours a day looking around for a dangerous situation and hoping
Right.
it doesn't happen, that you just have to
Yeah.
be on your toes, observing all day long. And I think that's definitely transferred into, how I would interact, that you can still enjoy the situation that you're in, but you're just very aware of your surroundings. You have to kind of look out at the people that are around you and see you're a little bit, using that keen eye of looking for small clues that could hint that something's going on. Um, when you're a lifeguard, you're looking at possibly a life or death situation.
Right. Yeah.
That you're just, you're trying to be relaxed and having a good time at work, but you're also having to pay attention nonstop all day and be
Right.
on your A game. There's no going to work and hoping for the best and slacking off in one of those
Well,
situations.
right. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the way that you're describing it, it's very similar where you're like, is that kid splashing or drowning?
Yeah.
'Cause is that,
Yeah.
is that fun, or are they swimming underwater, or do I need to dive in and save them?
Yeah. It's kind of like, if you're in that situation, whether it's at a bar, a gala, a party, whatever it might be, is, that's that time of, all right, hey, I'm going to get up from the chair. I'm going to walk around and put myself closer to the situation to observe.
No, and I think just, speaking from my own experience, so as somebody who's a survivor who has PTSD and one of the symptoms of PTSD is hypervigilance. And so sort of always being on edge, not ever being able to like turn off that ability
Yeah.
and just like relax and be a part of a situation, is I can tell you that when I am with somebody who I know is more trained or more willing to be hypervigilant in a situation, like, I feel so much more relaxed. Like, it really
Yeah.
does have it makes such a meaningful difference to know that even if it's just for that time that you're at the crowded bar where it's, if you have somebody who's like, look, like, I know where all the exits are. We're good.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, whew, okay.
Yeah.
Or just that like hand on the shoulder of somebody that you know and trust.
Yeah.
Really different, that it's like, okay, I'm physically sort of grounded in this situation, like I am with a safe person. And so kind of how do you learn and build those skills? And so the other skill that I've heard you talk a lot about is just the skill of listening. In your experience early on in the wake of your mom taking her life is that you had some experiences of people not listening to you. And so, or not being willing to listen to you. And so I'm just kind of curious then, sort of what that, what can you talk a little bit more about the difference between listening and not listening and what that both either sounds like or feels like, whether
Yeah.
you're giving or receiving?
I think when it comes to listening, it's not necessarily always about, what are you going to say to the right, are you going to say the right thing in this moment to help console someone or talk to them about trauma or something, an incident that happened. It's sometimes you really just need to sit back and let them talk and be the one to understand what happened yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best thing to say is just saying nothing at all and just hearing them out.
Well,
Or just simply saying, I believe you, I'm here for you, your feelings are valid.
right.
Don't, listening isn't trying to interject. You're not trying to put your opinion in there. You're not trying to put your 2 cents in there. You're listening solely to them and not to speak yourself
So
and to
wait,
understand.
so when you are thinking about that time in your life, is that you weren't looking for somebody to solve the problem.
Yeah.
You weren't looking for somebody to make it hurt less. You weren't looking for somebody to like help you conceptually understand what the rest of your life would look like that this
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
had happened. Is you really just wanted somebody to be like, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, pretty much. It's you just want someone to let you kind of get your thoughts out so you're not holding them in. Not saying, you're not trying to make someone carry them for you, but just being able to voice them and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking right now. This is how I feel. You know, will you just sit here with me for an hour and
Right.
let's just talk?
Right.
You don't need to say anything. I just need to say what I need to say.
Yep.
And that's it. At the end, just say, thanks for confiding in me.
Right. Well, I think sometimes, our thoughts and our feelings can feel a lot larger when they're bouncing around inside our own heads.
Yeah.
And so it's simply just being able, like, can you just give me some space to be able to say what's on my mind? I don't know what it's going to sound like
Yeah.
when it comes out, but then maybe we can make sense of it together. There's just a little bit of that sense making that happens when you're
Yeah.
in connection with another
And I know
person.
I've definitely been in that where it's, that thought is bouncing around my head. And you start talking, and next thing you seem like it's like a rambling, incoherent point, and it doesn't even feel like you've necessarily said anything, but you feel 10 times better at the end because you're able to
Right.
just get that out.
Right. Right. And it sounds like you've now found a set of people in your life who are able to create that space when you need it,
Yeah.
and you've also learned how to create that space more effectively for others. Any tips you would give somebody who's trying to get better at listening?
Except that the situation's not about you. It's about the other
Mhm.
person.
Yeah,
It's not about talking. It's just about being there for them. It's not about trying to solve their problem.
that's a
It's
hard
just,
one for some
yeah, I
people.
think it's, I forget who said it, but I heard just kind of this great point of view of like, are you looking for solutions or are you looking for comfort?
Yeah,
And realizing that, a lot of the time somebody just wants comfort. You're not there to solve the fact that something traumatic happened to them.
right.
You're just there
It's an
to,
unsolvable
yeah,
thing.
you're just there to be a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen to, just to be there to support someone.
Yeah. So thank you again, Mike, for being here. It was great to be able to have this set of conversations with you. And thank you to everyone who is listening today. Hopefully, you picked up a few practical tips for your own journey on uncomfortable conversations. And if you want to learn more, you can check out the Uncomfortable Conversation on Instagram or YouTube.